Good afternoon. On behalf of the UCI Center for the Study of Democracy, it's my pleasure to welcome you today to the 2014 Peltason Lecture on Democracy. I'm Louis DeCipio. I'm the director of the center, and we're very pleased today to have the opportunity to hear from UC President Janet Napolitano, who will discuss the miracle in our midst. President Napolitano will be introduced in a moment by UCI Chancellor Michael Drake. But before inviting Chancellor Drake to the podium, I'd like to take just a moment to briefly introduce you to the Center for the Study of Democracy and to the Peltason Lecture Series. The center was formed about 15 years ago to sponsor research and education to improve the democratic process globally. We achieved this goal by supporting graduate student and faculty research on democracy, by serving as a home to scholars from throughout the United States and the world who seek to use Los Angeles as a laboratory for the study of democracy, and by ensuring that there's an ongoing dialogue between scholars and practitioners on the process of democracy. The Peltason Lecture Series, of which today's is the 14th, is one component of this effort to ensure ongoing dialogue. The series honors the contributions of Jack and Suzanne Peltason to the University of California and to the higher education in the United States. Jack's contribution is seen at UCI and throughout the UC system every day. He served as UCI's chancellor from 1984 to 1993 and as 16th president of the University of California from 1992 to 95. Suzanne Peltason was by his side throughout his many contributions and is the author of UCI, The First 25 Years. She continues to build the sense of community that has made UCI so successful over the past 50 years. And it is in their honor that we established the Peltason Lecture Series on democracy. As a courtesy, we'd like to ask you not to use flash photography during today's presentation. Please also turn off your cell phones if you haven't already, and take a moment to notice the nearest emergency exits. Should you need to leave the auditorium, if Dean Schoenfeld would like to leave now, he's welcome to. I'd like to share with you the format for today's lecture. Unfortunately, if you have to leave the auditorium during the session, Dean Schoenfeld, you will not be able to return. After President Napolitano's comments, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. You either picked up cards or they will be distributed to you and they will be collected so that we can ask questions from the stage. Thank you for your consideration and please enjoy the lecture. On that note, it is my pleasure to introduce UCI's Chancellor, Michael Drake, to introduce President Napolitano.
Thank you very much. Very nice to see everyone here this afternoon. And very nice to have the honor and privilege of introducing Janet Napolitano to this group. I've, as many of us here, have been part of the University of California for many years, and I've had the chance to work with several of the UC presidents over those years. Briefly, David Gardner, I would say in the 1980s, I was in the audience like you and had a chance to say hello to him. And then I remember, and actually was speaking a little bit earlier today about meeting Jack Peltason, which happened in November of 1994, my first time presenting before the Regents. And what I remember then, we were speaking with great energy before the Regents. There was a very controversial Regents topic on the table. And what I remember about Jack after hours of this discussion was that he came and gave me a gentle pat on the shoulder of encouragement. I had not met him before. But it was a very human moment where he sort of gave me a pat on the shoulder. Actually, we visited him this morning, and I reminded him of that. And it was the first day we'd met, but I just was touched in a way that made me think this was a special person who was connected with people and knew how to do things to encourage people to move forward. And I think that Jack, throughout his career, has been someone who's made the place that he was a better place. Let me just ask a quick question. How many people here know Jack Peltason? So that's one. Okay, so how many people here who know Jack Peltason don't love him? And I see no hands that went up. And I think that's actually a scientific fact that Jack and Susie really are among the most loved and respected people that any of us have met. And it's a great privilege to have the honor to be associated with them and to be here today and to be able to introduce our guest speaker, Janet Napolitano, in the honor of Jack and Susie Peltason. I mentioned UC presidents, so I mentioned David Gardner and I mentioned Jack Peltason. I had the chance also to work then after that with Dick Atkinson and with, let me see, Dick Atkinson when he was having a senior moment. Dick Atkinson, yes. Bob Dines, there we go. I got stuck on Bob Dines for a second. Bob Dines, then Mark Udoff in sequence. And so it's wonderful to be able to work with this series of people, and great to be able to welcome Janet Napolitano to that great legacy. We, as the university system, have the great privilege of being able to attract someone of her broad experience. Very few of the people who we have known have had the experience of running an organization as large as the state of Arizona. Very few people that we have known have had the experience of running an organization as complicated as the Department of Homeland Security. And she brings that great experience to us here this afternoon. And if we're going to have someone who's going to talk with us about democracy and what it can be and what it can mean and about the challenges that face us in higher education, no one is better suited than our President, Janet Napolitano, who I'm pleased to introduce to you this afternoon. Janet.
Good afternoon. It is great to be back on such a beautiful day in Irvine. I had the opportunity this morning to visit with Jack, Susie Peltason in their home, and to bestow on Jack the President's Medal, the highest recognition that the University of California awards. And I think it's a special moment. The only time I've actually seen the President's Medal is that the actual President's Medal hangs in the conference room at our offices in Oakland. Jack is the only person I know who ever actually received it, and I think there can't be a more worthy recipient. I'm told that when he was the chancellor, one of his favorite things to do was to greet visiting faculty from the Midwest and the East Coast by apologizing for the weather. And even on the sunniest of days, like what we have today, he would shake his head at these poor recruits still wearing their winter coats, I'm sure, and he would say, "I'm sorry, the weather is usually better than this." I also told that he didn't have a lot of difficulty in recruiting those particular individuals. I asked Jack this morning what message he would want me to convey to you this afternoon. And to paraphrase, he reminded me that every day has a crisis to deal with. For students, it can be an exam, a project that's due, a term paper, whatever. But he said it's important not to lose the forest for the trees. It's important to leave time to think and thence to dream. And I think every single one of us in this auditorium this afternoon can and should take those words to heart. It is so easy to fill your day with meetings and this and that's, and not to take a time to step back and to think. So in thinking about this lecture this afternoon and the relationship of democracy, Jack's field of study, to the university, and why it matters that we have great public universities in the United States, it brought me to thinking particularly about California and what California has done. Because I, as a newcomer coming in, have perceived that sometimes Californians take what is here for granted. And what is here is a miracle. It's the story of what we see around us, and it's the story of how it came to be. It's a story that has different beginnings. It's a story that has no end. And it's a story that is changing as we live it. And it's the story of this university, the University of California. Now, at some level, you all know this story, but you haven't probably thought about it for a while. You live the story every day. But I think it's useful to step back and consider the overall magnitude of the narrative and how it came to be, as I titled this talk, The Miracle in Our Midst. And all humility aside, I think I'm a good person to have that discussion with. Why? Because I come from another state where we had public universities. I come as someone who chaired the National Governors Association and saw different public university systems in different states around the country. And I will tell you right now, no state has anything close to what the University of California is. Not even close. They may have one campus that tries to be close. But they don't have 10 campuses. And they don't have the University of California. And it's important then to say, well, why did it happen here? What was in the water here that led to the creation of this institution? You have to go back to California's very first constitutional convention, where California settlers began to imagine that a university for California could be the equal of a Harvard or of an Oxford. And at that time, that was a very audacious thing to say and to even contemplate. But today, as I stand before you, the stature and the reach of the University of California are even greater than that envisioned. Some people conceive of the UC as one university with 10 campuses, right? Others think of it as 10 universities with a head office in Oakland. It doesn't really matter. That debate, to me, doesn't really matter. What we are is the University of California, Berkeley, the University of California, Los Angeles. It's UC San Diego, it's UC Davis, it's UC Santa Barbara, Riverside, San Francisco, Santa Cruz, Merced, and importantly, today it's UC, the University of California here at Irvine. And there is no other public higher education entity in the United States or in the world that shares that mix. To begin, we are a research university. We're not just a research university. We are at the forefront of basic research endeavors in myriad fields that are leading to the creation of new knowledge every day. And in that, we have professors working side by side with students in laboratories throughout our campuses, exploring new horizons, not only to find answers, but also to ask new questions. And that sense of curiosity, the desire to find meaning, lies at the heart of the University of California research mission. Now, if you think basic research doesn't matter, and I spent a fair amount of time in Sacramento, and one of the things I try to do is explain basic research in Sacramento. Just saying. But if you think basic research doesn't matter, you got to put it in some terms that people appreciate. So think about Randy Schekman. He is a Berkeley professor. He is our newest Nobel laureate. He won this past year in the category of physiology or medicine. He has taught at Berkeley for more than 3 decades. He's taught everything from the most esoteric of postgraduate seminars to freshman introductory courses. Now, basic research, years ago, he started exploring yeast cells and the transport and secretion of proteins within those cells. And he wanted to know, why does protein move so rapidly across a yeast cell when it doesn't move as rapidly across other types of cells? I wouldn't even know to ask the questions. But when he asked that question and began to explore it, he could not know where that basic research would lead, because when you're talking basic research, the potential applications are very rarely clear at the outset. You don't know where it's going to lead you. Where it led him ultimately was to discoveries that have since changed how we treat hepatitis B, how we treat diabetes, and are now being incorporated in new treatments for Alzheimer's. So basic research, questions being asked, teaching occurring, laboratories being busy, all leading then to different questions, different discoveries. The University of California today, this university does 10% of all of the federally funded research in the United States. Did you know that? 10% of all federally, in one university in one state. We graduate 7% of the nation's PhDs. I mean, one university, one state. Why? Because we are a great public research university. But at the same time, we're also a terrific engine of social mobility. Now, public land-grant universities, of which we are one, were originally envisioned in the mid-19th century. Indeed, Abraham Lincoln signed one of the foundational statutes that created the public land-grant system across the United States. And they were designed to open up doors of opportunity across the country. But no university has opened its doors the way the UC has so far. 41% of our freshmen this year are first-generation college students. You know, when they show up to graduate in hopefully 4 years, their parents hope it's 4 years, maybe 5.5, but most of them will come in 4 years. Their parents and their grandparents, none of them will have received a college education, but they will have at a great public research university. That is, to give you an absolute number, 17,000 students, the first in their families to go to college. Think about the impact on the family, on their neighborhoods, on the community, and on the state at large. 1 out of 3 are from historically underrepresented groups. And more than 40% of all of our freshmen come from low-income families. And when I say low income, you know, the language in higher education vernacular is they are Pell Grant eligible. That means they're really low income. So when you add it all together, 4 of our campuses each have more low-income students than all 8 Ivy League universities combined. That's an amazing narrative for the University of California. And what is amazing is we do the research and we provide the engine of social mobility, not at 1 campus and not at 2 or 3 or 4, but at 10 campuses throughout the state. So that's the magic. And there's no standing still for this university. In a state as dynamic as the one in which we live, the state where we are standing, or where we are, standing still literally is falling behind. We have to keep moving, and we have to keep moving forward, and we have to keep evolving. In fact, if you wanted to create an analogy for the University of California, think about the phenomenon of astrophysics. So the UC, if you think about it, or the state of California, if you think about it, really we can start with the gold rush, the Big Bang. The world rushed in, and in short order, the lust for quick riches matured into a desire to build a new and stronger state. The desire gave birth to a small college in downtown Oakland that ultimately would become UC Berkeley. It was originally called the College of California, and it struggled financially during its first few years. In fact, struggling financially is something we apparently have gotten very good at. So at that time, Professor Henry Durant, who was the first president of the university, he was often forced to dodge bill collectors in the street. And what he would do is he would get students and he would send them out as decoys wearing his own signature top hat and overcoat while he ducked out the side doors. We don't have to do that anymore. He was scrambling to cover bills that would be equivalent to about $938 today. In contrast, our annual budget this year will exceed $24 billion. 938, 24 billion. The story of President Durant and the fiscal challenges that his small university faced is a prescient one. It foreshadows the challenges that every new campus of the university has confronted one way or another. Because at every point in this university's history, every offspring campus has been branded by cynics as a boondoggle, a bridge too far. Each, however, ultimately made the university stronger, and as a result made California stronger. Now, going back to the first one, Berkeley, it first spun off a southern branch in Los Angeles, today known as UCLA. Now, the idea of a separate southern campus was a big struggle. That was a big sell to make. Because, after all, Berkeley was the center of the universe, right? And if you doubt Berkeley's efforts to come out on top in the power struggle, consider that most of the streets around the UCLA campus today are still named after early Berkeley leaders. UC Davis spun off next from the University Farm near Sacramento, and it spun off in a similar fashion. UC Riverside spun off from a citrus experiment center by the Santa Ana River. UC Santa Barbara spun off from the Santa Barbara State Normal School of Manual Arts and Home Economics. The system, as you know, spun off UC Irvine in the 1960s, along with UC San Diego and UC Santa Cruz. A great big splurge in enlarging the university. And it was needed. It was driven by the baby boom and the boomers, and also a rush of inward migration into California, which caused a very large leap in the demand for admission to the university. And so the university, with help from the state, built these new campuses to accommodate the swelling number of new students. Most recently, in the heart of the Central Valley, the foundation was laid for the first major American research university of the 21st century, and that's UC Merced, the first major research university of the century we live in now. Now, this is not to suggest that the creation of our constellation of world-changing campuses was a simple matter of intent alone. This was a human endeavor. And like all human endeavors, there have been complications. UC President Clark Kerr addressed this very topic in his memoirs. And as he wrote, new campuses were seen by the older ones as upstarts and interlopers. They were, quote, a rescue mission taking enrollment pressures off the bigger campuses. But they were also, quote, thieves taking away resources. Dreams for some, Kerr wrote, can be nightmares for others. Kerr cites a letter sent by an unnamed librarian from an unnamed campus to an unnamed librarian at another unnamed campus, concluding with the warning, quote, don't let those blankety-blank campuses emerge too far. And yes, my friends, dear anteaters, they were talking about campuses like this one. But in the end, the process has proven to be irreversible, and indeed, the institution has never been subdued by rivalry and pettiness. Now, the symmetry of this evolution is perhaps best captured by a picture. The first chancellor at UC Merced was a woman named Carol Tomlinson Casey. And before the campus even opened, when it was still a cow pasture surrounded by a barbed wire fence, Chancellor Tomlinson Casey hung a big photo on the wall of her office in downtown Merced. And the photo showed bulldozers scraping a barren landscape for no obvious purpose. The picture had to be at least 30 years old, because you see, the field that the bulldozers were scraping was what became UC Irvine. The bulldozers were preparing the ground for the construction of this very campus. So you have to ask yourself, why did a UC Merced chancellor hang a scene from the earliest days of UC Irvine on her office wall? What she told visitors was that it was to remind herself that however daring, however audacious, however unlikely the vision of UC Merced might seem today, it would happen. It would take time, but it would happen. And that's perhaps the most wondrous phenomenon of the UC, that sense of optimism and we can get this done. And when we do, it will be done well. Now, from its inception, UCI was a special place, known to some as UCI, the Instant University, because the moniker referred to the speed with which it blossomed into a full-fledged institution of higher learning. Its mantra was and still is straightforward. Forge a solid, forward-moving, audacious plan, a blueprint, and then stick to it. Now, one of the architects of the original academic plan was Jack Peltason, in whose honor this lecture is named, and who is here with us today, I think. Jack, in the back. Thank you for being here. The site was dedicated on June the 20th, 1964, a year before the first class of 1,589 students crossed the threshold. And the centerpiece of the dedication was a speech by then President Lyndon Johnson. He stood near this spot and he looked around at what he could see, which was a piece of earth, some dirt. And he said the following, quote, I have been in California less than 30 hours, and I already know why you are number one in the nation in so many fields. Your leaders, he said, have the vision, and your people have the vigor that put California on top. I predict you will stay there. There is a sense of urgency in California, he said, that translates good words into good deeds. Now, half a century later, that vision and that vigor And those good words and those good deeds have moved this campus forward in many significant ways. UCI is ranked #1 of U.S. universities that are younger than 50 years old. It is the youngest school to gain membership in the prestigious Association of American Universities. It is the first public university in Nobel Prize history to have professors win in 2 different fields in the same year, F. Sherwood Rowland in chemistry and Frederick Reines in physics. And then for good measure, the campus produced a 3rd Nobel laureate, Irvine Rose, also in chemistry. Given all these benchmarks of success, it's only fitting that next month, another United States president will be coming to Orange County to celebrate what this University of California, Irvine, represents. Now, I can't tell you what President Obama will say. I spent a little time with him, and I guarantee that his eye will be cast forward, not backwards, and he will be focused on the future audacious dreams ready to be realized by you, the current people at the University of California, Irvine. Now, I like to articulate what the University of California is about in this way. You know, when I first started here at the end of September, it's like drinking from a fire hose. You know, you're learning about all the campuses, meeting all these people, getting familiar with the programs, et cetera. But if you try to boil it down to 2 short phrases that people can remember, I boil it down to these 2 phrases, that at the University of California, we teach for California and we research for the world. We teach for California, we research for the world. It's what we've done since our founding. It is a roadmap for what we must do for generations to come. The university and this state actually grew up together. The idea that California needed a university of its own was enthusiastically raised as early as 1849, and we were formed 2 decades later. And the relationship between the state and the university has always been symbiotic. California simply would not be the world-renowned beacon of hope and prosperity without the University of California. In turn, UC would not have emerged as the world's leading public research university without dynamic, forward-looking creativity and concern for the Commonwealth and the common good that have long been part of California's DNA. Sometimes that DNA is referred to as the California dream. And I think it is our privilege and our obligation to make sure that that dream endures. We're going to have to fight to make sure that it does, and to make clear to all Californians that UC represents a public good that serves and nourishes the entire society, not just those who learn and work on our campuses. I think that is perhaps my greatest role and my greatest responsibility today. It is to lead the fight every day and everywhere, from Oakland to Orange County and to Sacramento and to Washington, D.C., and indeed around the globe, to lead the fight to make sure that we retain the ideas and the principles of excellence and the presence as an engine of social mobility we have been to so far. And let me not be sanguine about it. This is a real fight. You know, the idea of public universities is coming under attack from a variety of sources. And we have, for too long, assumed that people, of course, recognize how great we are. And of course, they're going to give us everything we want. And of course, we can go around bragging about how we are the #1 public research university in the world, which we are. But to retain that label and to put real meaning into the phrase, teach for California, research for the world, that's a fight. and every single person in this audience and outside this hall and around this great campus and in this community are going to need to join in the fight with me. In this fight, we are going to have some good days and some bad days. I've been in some political fights in my life. They're not all smooth sailing. We're going to have some days that seem a little bit ho-hum, nothing special. And then we're going to have some days when we feel like we're being nibbled to death by ducks, It can be easy in that day-to-day grind to get lost in the ground cover and to forget about the forest. And that's exactly what Jack Peltason reminded me of this morning. So on days like this, particularly on the days when you feel yourself being nibbled to death by ducks, it is important to step back and remind ourselves again of the big picture, to remind ourselves again that we are part of a miracle in our midst that is transforming lives of people all over the world. We are all a little part of something much bigger than each of us individually. We all enjoy the benefits of those who came before us with big dreams. A gold rush settler thinking that we could have another Harvard in California in 1849. These were people who could look at a barren landscape, at a mound of ground or a piece of dirt, and see a campus like the University of California here at Irvine. We need to share in that vision, and we need now to make sure that we translate our vision of today with what the university must be like tomorrow and for the next generation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for some very inspiring words. If you have questions for President Napolitano, please write them and pass them to the aisles, and we have some volunteers set out to collect them.
Write legibly, please.
For my sake, thank you. I'll take the privilege of being here and ask the first question. You're in a unique position to think about some of the issues that you raised right at the end of your talk. You've served as governor, so you've worked with legislators to fund public higher education in Arizona. You've headed one of the major federal agencies for funding, doing many things, but among other things, funding research. What's your sort of vision for the short-term and medium-term future for state-level funding for public higher education and federal funding for research on public education and public higher education campuses?
Well, I think that at a state perspective, it's certainly going to be at the worst flat or a little bit of an increase over last few years. So the deep cuts and the corresponding tuition spikes that we saw, we will not see this next year. And we're about ready to go into the heavy part of the budget season in Sacramento, and we will be advocating vigorously for even greater investment in the university, making the argument again and again and again that California will not thrive unless this university thrives. It is a symbiotic relationship. And one of the things that gives California a competitive advantage vis-a-vis other states is the fact that you have this great university right here producing thousands of undergraduates and graduate students every single year. So we'll be flat, maybe a little up, maybe even more than that. Federal research funding, unfortunately, looks like it's going to stay flat. And if there is I'm often asked sometimes, what is the greatest risk that you saw to the nation's security when I was at DHS? I will tell you, one of the greatest risks is the failure to invest properly in things that have long-term outcomes. And I would put basic research right at the top of that list. We are the nation's #1 recipient of federal research dollars. We're going to fight to keep that, but we're also going to fight to make that pool larger than it is now. But we can't stop there with the government funding. I think that we have to look at other ways that we can enlarge the pie, ways that we can bring more revenue into the university, whether it be public-private partnerships done in the right way. We're not going to privatize a public university, but there are partnerships that I think would be beneficial for us to explore, greater philanthropy, and quite frankly, greater alumni giving. One of the differences I've noticed between public universities and private, when you go to a private university, you're hammered from the first day you walk in as a freshman that you're going to be giving back. And you're going to be thinking about giving back even while you're writing tuition checks today. And it is viewed as, in a way, as an obligation. You know, you've got a great education, it's an obligation to give back to your school. Public universities have always been able to sit back and say, well, the state will take care of that. We don't really need to rely on our alumni. At the University of California, we need to rely on our alumni. So our alumni are getting the benefit of a great public education. We have 1.6 million living alumni, a great force to mobilize in a greater way than we have to date. While we are fighting vigorously for getting greater state investment, greater federal investment, we also need to be looking at other sources of revenue for the institution. That's part of the fight.
Oh, thank you very much. A question from the audience. What are your thoughts regarding the challenges facing the future of the California Master Plan? As a new immigrant to the state, you might have some comments on that.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, the California Master Plan was conceived 50 years ago or so, almost the same time as UC Irvine, kind of a coincidence perhaps. And what it did is it basically said that the portal to higher education in this state, you should have three big choices. You can go to a community college, or you can go to the state universities like Fresno State, San Jose State, et cetera, or the University of California if you want to go to a research university. That basic structure, to me, makes a lot of sense. And it's one of the reasons why California's higher education system is better than the other states. However, all stories must evolve and change. And the master plan needs to keep up with today's current reality. So here's today's current reality. We don't have enough seats at all of these institutions for all the students we hope to graduate. So I'm involved with the chancellor of the state university system and the chancellor of the community college system now, and really looking in depth at what enrollment requirements are going to be throughout California. Because we don't want to continue to cite the master plan, brag about the master plan, and then not be able to meet the expectations of the master plan long run. Just as I don't want to have to be out there bragging about us being the top public research university in the world if we somehow have lost that label. So we have to keep these expectations real and grounded in fact. So, and if I might, to me, if you're going to have a democratic society, you have to have a very vigorous public higher education system. It doesn't work otherwise. And so, again, to me, when we think about California and its future and where we're going as a state, we're going to have to revisit the master plan.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to shift hats a little bit here. Going going back to the last one. You've served as governor of Arizona, as Secretary of Homeland Security, and now as our president. How would you describe America's immigration system and the problems that it faces? And now that you are not burdened by your former hat, what would you recommend be done as part of a reform of immigration in the United States?
Oh, I have lots of ideas there. I mean, there's almost no part of the immigration system that works. It is broken, and it creates hardships at all kinds of levels. I think that we need to open up visas and make immigration easier. I think it is ludicrous that we graduate students from this university who cannot stay because they cannot get the right kind of visa. I think that the issue of border security is simply used too often as a cover for not really wanting to address immigration reform. I probably know the border better than just about anybody you could have on this stage. I mean, I grew up in New Mexico. I spent most of my adult life in Arizona. I've walked that border, flown it. I've ridden horseback along large stretches of it. You cannot seal that border, and throwing billions of dollars at it as a predicate to reform, to me, is not the best way to go. I think you need to invest, more importantly, in the actual ports of entry and how they operate, as opposed to the great expanses between the ports. I think we have to find a way for those who are in the country now who are undocumented, if they meet certain criteria, to get right with the law and to get documented so that they can be on the path to citizenship. That's what this country has done historically during periods of migration. We are at the end of a period, or we're not at the end. We are in a period of migration now, but to me, it is very difficult to administer the law as it is currently done in a way that is consistent with our values. So I think there was a comprehensive immigration reform bill that passed the U.S. Senate last summer, and I was the administration witness before the Senate Judiciary Committee for that bill. And I think its general approach was the right approach, except for I think it put too much money into the border as opposed to the actual ports of legal entry. But the general tenets of it, I think, are the right ones. We now have a problem that is political in nature, in that the branch of government that's supposed to deal with this is incapable of dealing with it, or has become incapable of dealing with it, and that's the U.S. Congress. And we're just going to have to keep up the advocacy. So I'm going to continue to fight for that. I hope others here in this audience will as well. And I think the University of California would be a prime beneficiary of reform in the immigration law itself.
Thank you very much. How can UCOP, and I'll amend the question a little bit.
UCOP, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry. How can the Office of the President and the campuses better facilitate entrepreneurship by faculty, by graduate students, by the community at large?
I think we can do several things, and I've got a major effort underway looking at how we do entrepreneurship, how we do handle intellectual property, how we do handle technology transfer, how do we streamline our own processes, how do we bring those who have venture capital into connection with those who are doing research, how do we provide our PhD students, those of them that do not want to stay in academia, but who'd like to try out the private market? How do we provide them with the necessary business-type tools they will need to have in addition to the substantive knowledge in their particular area? So I think this is an area where the university can and will be doing a lot more in the coming years, because, as I said, we teach for California, we research for the world. Part of that is getting our research out into the world. And as I also said, we need to be enlarging revenues for the university, and that is one area that I believe could be fruitful for us.
Thank you very much. Mixing your hats now, if you'll excuse the metaphor, the country is going through a major change with the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. And the University of California is certainly a major deliverer of healthcare services in California, not just to our employees, but to people using our healthcare facilities. How does the implementation of the Affordable Care Act affect our budget outlook, and what can we do to seize the opportunities presented by the Affordable Care Act?
Well, I think the Affordable Care Act is one of those transformational statutes that we don't quite know all the things that are going to result from it. We know a few things. We know that more people will have insurance than before. That's good for us. We want to treat, the more people we treat who have insurance, the better off we are as a system. We also hope that under the ACA, more people will seek medical care at the preventive stage as opposed to at the acute stage. And that we will also be able to treat people better who have chronic conditions or prevent a condition such as obesity from ripening into something like diabetes or serious heart disease. So both from an insurance perspective and a healthcare outcomes perspective, I think it's a very optimistic picture as it evolves and more people are registered. On the immediate downside, we're in that period of transition, and transitions are never easy. And there have been some bumps in the road. And those, you just have to look to how the Social Security Act was implemented to know that when you do these major big transformations, you don't get it right the first time. And there will have to be a lot of fixes along the way. I think we run 5 large health centers. We are the 4th largest provider of health care in the state of California, in addition to everything else we do. And we're the leading medical researcher in the nation in terms of the research that we do. I think we can help lead the country through some of those and over some of those bumps as we move forward. So I think to sum up, I think over the long term, it will be very beneficial for the University of California and the healthcare institutions that we have.
Thank you very much. Online education has certainly gotten a lot of attention over the last few years and has the potential to give access to research and the expertise of the UC system to many people who previously didn't have that access. How will the UC system be developing its offering of online programs, and what role do you see as the future for online education, maybe even beyond the University of California?
Yeah, I think, yes. When it was originally announced, we've invented MOOCs, and MOOCs will solve all of the cost issues involved in higher education. I think that is not proven to be accurate. However, I think we need to be careful when we say that not to dismiss the role of online. There will be a role for online. It is an academic function, so it is for the academic faculty to take it on. But what I'm encouraging the faculty to do, and they are doing, is design online courses that have the advantage of opening up course offering for students throughout the system that help enlarge our capacity by assisting students in getting that one last perhaps course they need, or it's a course that may be taught only once every other year on their campus, but might be taught at another campus that they could take it in some sort of an online. That we explore the use of hybrid courses, partially online, partially in person, or with teaching assistants. And that we look at whether we can provide online courses to larger members of the UC community, our staff, for example. One idea that's been raised is providing them for our alumni, by way of example. So it will be a tool in our toolbox that we use, and I think it will be, as all things are when they're new, it will get better over time and get better quickly. I know I'll probably take one of the classes myself sometime. You never know.
Well, I offer mine if you're interested.
Are you a hard grader?
For you, we'll make a deal. And deadlines, they slip. You know President Obama perhaps better than most of us do. What do you hope to hear from him? Well, we may not know him very well. What do you hope to hear from him in a month when he speaks at our commencement?
Well, first, I think it's great that he's coming here. And I think it's great that he's coming here on our 50th and on the 50th of the Great Society. And it wouldn't surprise me if he did not talk about that, but then talk about our own audaciousness of hope, to use the title of one of his books, and what we hope for our students, and what the students should hope for and contribute back themselves. I think it'll be a great talk, and I think it's going to be a great event for UCI, so I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great.
As are we all, I think. I've been asking questions where I have a sense of the answer just from my knowledge of the UC system. This one I don't, so if it's an inappropriate question, I apologize. UCOP has announced that it will cease funding of the Lick Observatory in 2018. And the questioner asserts that this has been a very productive facility for system-wide research and education. Can you go into your thinking about that decision and whether it's open to continued discussion?
Yeah, so you know, one of the things the University of California is known for around the world is astronomy, and the research on many of our campuses there. One of our facilities is a facility called Lick Observatory. The plan was, and this was a plan made several years ago, was that it was not going to close, but that it would, at a certain point, go off of the budget of Oakland and go onto the budgets of the campuses that were actually using the facility. I think that has been misinterpreted by some as saying, well, we want to close the observatory. There is no plan to close Lick. But there is a pre-existing plan to change the funding stream, and that has been in place for several years. At the same time, we are proceeding, and I just signed the documents yesterday. We're in a very exciting partnership with Caltech, with China, India, and Canada to build a 30-meter telescope in Hawaii, near the site of the current Keck Observatory, which we also operate. It's on a volcano in Hawaii. I can't wait for my site visit. And that will be, when that is constructed, and we hope to break ground this October, will be the largest and best facility of its kind in the world.
Well, thank you very much. On that note, let me ask the audience to thank President Napolitano for inspiring words and
Thank you.
Thoughtful responses. If I could ask Senator Hicks to come forward. This is what we call a photo opportunity. On behalf of the University of California, Irvine and the Center for the Study of Democracy, it's my pleasure to present you with your very own anteater.
Put this through the security thing at the airport.
We always make the offer that we'll be happy to mail it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.